Kokomma was the pride of her village. With her flawless skin, bright eyes, and captivating smile, she was the girl everyone admired. However, despite her beauty and potential, Kokomma had little interest in school. She found it tedious and resisted her parents' efforts to keep her in class. The books, the endless lessons, none of it seemed to matter to her. All she dreamed of was an easy life, filled with gifts and excitement. It wasn't long before an older man named Ekanem noticed her. Ekanem was in his 50s, a poor farmer with little to his name except the 4 wives he already had. Despite his lack of wealth, he knew how to win young Kokomma's heart. He visited her with small gifts, biscuits, sweets, and cheap jewelry. For a girl who had never been showered with such attention, it felt like a dream. To Kokomma, Ekanem seemed like a generous man who would give her the life she desired. Ignoring her parents' warnings and the scornful whispers of the village, Kokomma ran away with Ekanem at the age of 16, convinced that she had found an escape from the life she dreaded. But the dream quickly shattered. Ekanem's home was not the paradise she imagined. It was a cramped, run-down house with barely enough space for his many wives and children. Almost immediately, Kokomma was thrust into a life of hardship.
Within a few years, she bore 5 children, each arrival bringing more responsibility and exhaustion. The older wives treated her as nothing more than a burden, and Ekanem, who had once wooed her with biscuits and promises, showed his true nature. He was unkind, dismissive, and left Kokomma to fend for herself and their children with little support. Days turned into years, and Kokomma's beauty faded as she worked tirelessly, doing menial jobs to keep her children fed. She would spend hours gathering firewood to sell, barely making enough money to survive. She carried water on her head, her back aching from the heavy loads. Hunger and fatigue became a constant in her life, wearing down her body and spirit.
Despite her sacrifices, Ekanem grew even more distant. He soon married more wives, and with his attention divided further, he decided to push Kokomma out of his life. One morning, without warning, he told her to leave his home. He let her take only 2 of her children, keeping the other 3 to raise within his crowded household. Heartbroken and humiliated, Kokomma had no choice but to return to her parents' home, her dreams reduced to dust. When she returned, it was in rags. The villagers who had once praised her beauty now pitied her, seeing the toll the years of suffering had taken. Kokomma, who had once worked with pride, now moved with her held bowed. She started working as a house help, cleaning homes, scrubbing floors, and washing clothes just to earn a little money. She also took up petty trading in the market, selling vegetables and firewood to provide for her 2 children. Life was already a struggle, but then came another blow. Her eldest daughter, Nse, barely 13, got pregnant by a poor boy in the village who couldn't provide for her or their child. This new burden crushed Kokomma's already fragile hope. She now had to take care of a newborn grandchild along with her own children, deepening the cycle of poverty she found herself trapped in.
Kokomma's health deteriorated rapidly. The endless work, lack of proper food, and stress wore her down. Her once radiant beauty had vanished, replaced by wrinkles and the stooped posture of someone far older than her years. She began to hide from her former classmates, many of whom had taken their education seriously and now led successful lives. When they visited the village, dressed in fine clothes with their children heading to good schools, Kokomma felt a stab of regret so deep it nearly broke her. She avoided them, feeling the weight of her choices. Their lives were filled with the opportunities she had once thrown away for a fleeting promise of easy comfort. Her story became a cautionary tale in the village, a bitter reminder of what happens when one turns away from education and hard work for a life of empty dreams. Kokomma spent her days in quiet suffering, striving to make ends meet, haunted by the past she could never change. The biscuits and sweet promises that lured her into a life of hardship had long crumbled into dust. leaving her with nothing but sorrow and regret.
As Kokomma struggled to survive, the weight of her poor choices pressed down on her every day. The dream she had once clung to had become a haunting memory, reminding her of the path she had chosen. Ekanem, the man who had lured her away with promises and biscuits, was now a distant figure, preoccupied with his growing collection of wives and children. He showed no concern for the family he had cast aside, leaving Kokomma to face her hardships alone.
The little money she earned never seemed to be enough, especially as her daughter, Lucy, now faced her own struggles with the newborn baby. Kokomma's health continued to decline. Malnutrition and exhaustion had sapped her once vibrant spirit. Her face, which had once radiated youth and beauty, now bore the deep lines of worry and fatigue. Her skin, once smooth and glowing, was rough and marked by scars from the harshness of her daily labor. People in the village would whisper about her as she passed, noting how quickly she had aged. She avoided her old classmates who had taken a different path. These were women who had completed their education, moved to the city, and built comfortable lives for themselves. Whenever they returned to visit their families, they would drive through the village in their cars, their children well-dressed and laughing. Kokomma would watch from the shadows, hiding her face. She couldn't bear to be seen by them, afraid they would recognize the girl she used to be beneath the weariness and sorrow that now marked her existence. It was not just shame that made her hide. It was the crushing weight of regret. She remembered how her parents had pleaded with her to stay in school, to focus on her studies, to build a future for herself. She had laughed off their warnings, believing that a life of comfort would come easily if she just found the right man. Now, that foolish dream had turned into a nightmare.
Her children, too, suffered the consequences of her choices. Inse, now a teenage mother, found herself repeating her mother's life. The young father of her child had disappeared, leaving Inse to rely solely on Kokomma. The cycle seemed endless, and Kokomma could see it playing out before her eyes. The dreams she once had for her children, to break free from the poverty she had known, now seemed impossible.
In the quiet moments of the night, after her children had fallen asleep, Kokomma would sit alone, staring out into the darkness. Her mind would wander back to the days when she had been young and carefree, before the burdens of life had worn her down. Tears would fall silently down her cheeks, not just for the life she had lost but for the future her children might never have. But despite her sorrow, Kokomma refused to give up entirely. She fought for every coin she could earn, every morsel of food she could provide. She sold whatever she could find, sometimes going days without eating so that her children could have something to fill their stomachs. The village women, moved by her plight, would sometimes offer her small jobs or give her leftover food from the market. Though it was a meager form of support, Kokomma accepted it with the humility of someone who had learned life's hardest lessons. Her story became well known in the village, not just as a cautionary tale but as a harsh reality faced by many. Some pitied her, while others used her as an example for their children, urging them to stay in school and avoid the mistakes Kokomma had made. Look at what happens when you run after fleeting dreams, they would say. Learn from Kokomma's suffering. But through it all, there was a sliver of resilience in her. Kokomma hid from her classmates and their successes, but she held her head high for her children. She refused to let them see her completely broken, knowing that they still depended on her strength. Her life was not the dream she had once hoped for, but it was the life she had, and she would fight for it until the very end. Kokomma's story was one of hardship and regret, but it also held a lesson for everyone around her. It showed the value of education, the dangers of youthful impulsiveness, and the lasting impact of one's choices. As Kokomma walked through the village, the women who saw her would whisper to their children, "Don't end up like her, make something of your life, learn from her suffering."
And so, Kokomma's tale became both a sorrowful memory and a guiding light, a painful reminder that life's path is shaped by the choices we make, and those choices can ripple out for generations. She bore her suffering with quiet strength, hoping that perhaps, just perhaps, her children might still have a chance to rewrite their future.
A legacy of perseverance and joy. Ekaite became a medical doctor, helping the community with their health challenges. She built a big hospital and health centers where the people accessed medical care at the primary level. Here ends my story about Kokomma's bitter choice. The moral of the story is that we should make good decisions, as every decision we make in life will affect us and our children at large. So, in whatever you do, make sure you make the right decisions. Here ends my story. Hope you enjoyed it.